The office building stood tall against the night sky, glowing like a glass tower above the quiet city. Inside, the corridors were empty. The sound of typing, ringing phones, and quick footsteps that filled the place during the day had vanished hours ago. Only the low hum of the lights and the distant sound of the cleaning machines could be heard. Maria pushed her cart down the long hallway, the small wheels squeaking with every turn. She wore an old blue uniform that hung a little loose on her thin frame. Her hands were rough from years of cleaning, scrubbing, and washing, but she didn't mind. As long as her daughter was safe, she could live with the tiredness. It was almost midnight. Most people would be home sleeping by now, but this was when Maria's work began. She cleaned every office on the top floors, including the biggest one, Mr. Alexander Reed's. Everyone in the company talked about him with both respect and fear. He was the kind of man who never smiled, who walked fast and who looked straight ahead like the world didn't exist beyond his plans and meetings. Maria had never seen him in person, but she had seen his picture once in a magazine left on his desk. He looked sharp and serious, the kind of man who made people nervous without saying a word. Maria took a deep breath as she reached his floor. She always started from the smaller offices first, saving the CEO's office for last. It was the quietest place, and she liked that. The wide windows offered a beautiful view of the city below. When she was done cleaning, she would sometimes pause for a few seconds to look at the lights. It reminded her that somewhere out there people were resting, laughing, living, and she was still pushing forward, trying to build a better life for her daughter. She unlocked the door with her small key, and the soft click echoed in the silent room. The smell of expensive cologne still lingered in the air. She could tell he had been there late again. There were coffee stains on the table and papers scattered everywhere. Maria began to tidy up quietly. She placed each paper neatly in a pile, wiped the desk, and polished the nameplate that read Alexander Reed, Chief Executive Officer. Sometimes she whispered his name softly, not out of admiration, but out of habit. She often talked to herself while she worked. It kept her company. "Mr. Reed, you sure leave a mess," she muttered with a small smile, even though no one could hear her. She moved on to dust the bookshelves, the table lamp, and the photo frame that sat near the corner of the desk. It showed a young boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, smiling brightly with missing teeth. She had noticed the picture before but never asked about it. She didn't have anyone to ask anyway. Still, every time she saw that little boy's smile, she felt a strange tug in her heart. Maybe it reminded her of her own daughter, Lila. Maria glanced at her old phone resting on the cart. The wallpaper showed Lila holding a flower she had picked from a sidewalk garden. She was 6 now, with big brown eyes and a laugh that made everything feel lighter. Maria worked nights so she could be home with her during the day. It wasn't easy, but it was the only way. Her shift was long, but she never complained. Complaining didn't pay bills. She used to work at a store years ago, but after her husband left and the rent kept rising, she had to take whatever job she could find. Cleaning offices wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. She often told Lila, "We may not have much, but we have love, and that's enough." As she swept the floor, she thought about tomorrow. Lila had a school recital, and she had promised to be there. She couldn't afford another disappointment. The last time she had missed it because of overtime, and Lila had come home with tears in her eyes saying, "It's okay, Mama. Maybe next time." The guilt had stayed with her for weeks. Maria sighed softly, rubbing her back as she worked. The silence in the CEO's office felt heavier tonight. Maybe it was the rain starting to fall outside, tapping against the glass windows like tiny fingers. She turned off the vacuum and stood for a moment, looking out at the wet streets below. Cars moved slowly, their headlights glowing in the mist. Somewhere in that city, someone was probably going through the same struggles, trying to make ends meet, trying to hold on. It gave her comfort to think she wasn't alone. Her stomach growled quietly. She hadn't eaten since afternoon. She took out a small sandwich from her bag, wrapped in old paper, and sat for a moment on the edge of the chair near the desk. She knew she shouldn't, but her legs were aching. She took a bite and closed her eyes for a second. When she finished, she noticed a small paper sticking out from under the computer keyboard. She carefully moved it. It was a sticky note with numbers and short reminders. She smiled. Even the richest man in the building left notes for himself like everyone else. It reminded her that maybe people weren't that different after all. Some just had bigger offices and cleaner clothes. She cleaned every corner carefully. She never left a single mark. The other cleaners sometimes teased her, saying she worked too hard for a company that didn't even know her name. But Maria believed that doing a good job was its own reward. If she was invisible, she wanted at least her work to speak for her. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. Maria finished polishing the glass table and gathered her things. Before leaving, she took one last look around the office. Everything looked perfect, quiet, polished, and still. As she reached for the light switch, her phone buzzed softly in her pocket. It was a message from Lila's babysitter. "She's asleep. Don't worry, she's safe," Maria smiled. Relief washed over her tired body. She whispered a short prayer of thanks, switched off the lights, and gently closed the door behind her. The hallway was dim, the lights flickering slightly as she pushed her cart toward the elevator. Her reflection in the shiny doors looked older than she felt. Sometimes she wondered if life would ever get easier. She didn't want luxury, just peace, stability, and a chance for her daughter to dream without fear. When she stepped out into the cool night air, the city smelled of rain. She pulled her coat tighter around her and walked to the bus stop. The streets were nearly empty. A few taxis passed, splashing water on the sidewalks. She didn't mind the wait. She used that time to think about Lila, about the stories she'd tell her in the morning before school. By the time she reached home, it was nearly 2 a.m. The apartment was small and quiet. The paint was peeling and the floor creaked, but to Maria it was home. She slipped off her shoes and went straight to Lila's room. The little girl was sleeping peacefully, one arm wrapped around a stuffed bear that had seen better days. Maria brushed the hair from her forehead and kissed her gently. "Good night, my angel," she whispered. "Mama's here." For a few minutes, she sat on the edge of the bed just watching her daughter breathe. The tiredness in her bones didn't matter anymore. Everything she did, every long night, every aching step, it was all for her. Maria went to the kitchen, washed her hands, and poured herself a small glass of water. The clock ticked again, reminding her she had only a few hours before she needed to wake up, make breakfast, and get Lila ready for school. Before going to bed, she opened her worn notebook and scribbled a few numbers: rent due, school fees, groceries. The list grew longer every week, but she still managed somehow. She closed her eyes and thought about the big office she had just cleaned. The contrast between her world and the CEO's was almost unreal. He probably drove home in a sleek car, to a big house with warm lights and soft furniture, yet deep inside she felt that people like him must also carry unseen burdens. Money didn't stop loneliness. Success didn't erase pain. Maybe, she thought, everyone in this city was fighting their own silent battles. As the rain continued to fall outside, Maria whispered a soft prayer before closing her eyes. She asked for strength, not miracles. She asked for another day of work, another chance to keep going. She didn't know that in just a few nights, a small innocent letter from her daughter would change everything. For now, she was just a mother, cleaning after strangers, chasing sleep, and holding on to hope. The next evening came faster than Maria expected. The day had been full and restless. She had woken up early, cooked breakfast, and walked her daughter Lila to school with sleepy eyes and a warm smile. The air was cool, carrying that faint smell of rain left from the night before. As they walked hand in hand, Lila's small voice kept Maria awake. She talked about her school recital, about her best friend who had a new pencil box, and about how she wanted to give her teacher a flower from the garden outside their apartment building. Maria listened with a mix of love and worry. She wanted to be at the recital more than anything, but her cleaning shift started right after sunset. Her heart hurt every time she thought about how often she had to say no to her daughter's small wishes. "Mama, will you come this time?" Lila asked softly, looking up with wide, hopeful eyes. Maria squeezed her little hand. "I'll try, sweetheart. I really will. But if I can't, I'll make it up to you, okay?" Lila nodded, though her face dropped a little. "I know, you always work hard. You're my hero." That single sentence stayed in Maria's heart the whole day. Those words were both her comfort and her pain. By evening, after she had picked Lila up and made her dinner, Maria's phone buzzed again. The babysitter had called to cancel. Her younger sister, who sometimes watched Lila, was also busy. She stared at the clock. It was almost 8:30. Her shift started at 9. For a few seconds, she stood frozen in the small kitchen, unsure of what to do. Then she looked at Lila, who was sitting quietly, coloring at the table. "Sweetheart," Maria began carefully, "would you like to come with Mama to work tonight? Just this once. You can bring your crayons and paper. You'll sit quietly while I clean, okay?" Lila's face lit up immediately. "Really, I can come with you?" Maria smiled and nodded. "Yes, but you have to promise to stay close to me and be extra quiet." She quickly packed a small bag with snacks, a bottle of water, and Lila's coloring book. Then they wrapped themselves in their old coats and stepped into the night. The bus ride was long but peaceful. Lila sat close to her mother, her small hands holding onto the bag tightly. She looked out the window, watching the tall buildings blur past in streaks of yellow and white lights. When they reached the office building, Maria felt a bit nervous. She had never brought her daughter here before. The security guard gave her a questioning look, but she explained softly, "The babysitter canceled. She'll sit quietly in the office while I work." The guard, an older man who had seen her for years, just nodded with a small smile. "No problem. She looks like a good kid." "Thank you," Maria said gratefully, taking Lila's hand and walking to the elevator. When the doors opened to the top floor, Lila's eyes widened. Everything looked so shiny and big. "Mama, this place looks like the buildings in my storybooks." Maria chuckled softly. "Yes, it does. But remember, we're here to work, so no running around, okay?" Lila nodded seriously and followed her mother down the hall. As they entered the CEO's office, Lila's little gasp filled the quiet room. "Wow, this place is huge," she whispered. Maria smiled and began to unload her cleaning supplies. "You can sit here on this chair, love. Draw something nice while I work." "I won't be long." Lila climbed onto the chair and took out her crayons. Her small legs dangled off the edge as she began to draw with quiet concentration. Maria started her routine, dusting the shelves, cleaning the windows, straightening the papers on the desk. She moved carefully, as always, making sure not a single thing was out of place. Every now and then she glanced at her daughter. The sight of Lila drawing so peacefully in such a grand room made her heart ache and swell at the same time. She wished she could give her a better life. One where she wouldn't have to sit in an empty office at night while her mother cleaned. After a while, Lila put down her crayon and looked at a picture frame on the desk. It was the same one Maria always noticed, the one with the smiling little boy. "Who's that, Mama?" she asked softly. Maria paused for a moment, glancing at the photo. "I think it's Mr. Reed's son," she said. "Maybe he doesn't live here anymore." "He looks happy," Lila said, studying the picture. "Do you think Mr. Reed misses him?" "I don't know, sweetheart," Maria replied, continuing to wipe the shelf. "Maybe he does. Everyone misses someone." Lila was quiet for a moment. Then she looked around the big office again. The desk was covered with neat stacks of paper, pens, and a few coffee mugs. To her it felt lonely, so big yet so quiet. She picked up one of her blank pages and began to write carefully, using her favorite purple crayon. Her handwriting was uneven, but her words came straight from the heart. "Dear Mr. Boss, my name is Lila. My mom cleans your office at night. She is very nice and works very hard. Sometimes she gets tired but still smiles. Please be kind to her. She's my hero." She drew a small heart at the bottom and added a little flower beside it. She looked at her drawing, smiled proudly, and folded the paper. Then she looked around for a place to put it. Her eyes landed on the shiny paperweight on the CEO's desk. She slid the note under it gently. "Now he'll see it when he comes," she whispered to herself. Maria was still finishing the floor when she turned and noticed her daughter near the desk. "Lila, what are you doing, sweetheart?" Lila quickly stepped back, her hands behind her back. "Nothing, Mama. I was just looking at the picture." Maria smiled tiredly. "All right, but don't touch anything, okay? These things are very important." "I didn't touch much," Lila said softly, her eyes darting briefly toward the paperweight. When the cleaning was done, Maria packed her things while Lila yawned. "Ready to go home, my love?" "Yes," Lila said, rubbing her eyes. "I'm sleepy." Maria took one last look around the office. Everything was neat again, just as it should be. She turned off the lights and held Lila's hand as they left quietly. The elevator ride down was slow, the only sound being the soft hum of the machine and Lila's half-asleep breathing. Maria looked at her daughter's reflection in the metal doors. She saw innocence, warmth, and everything she lived for. They stepped out into the cool night, the city lights glowing softly through the mist. The streets were calm, almost peaceful. Maria felt grateful that the night had gone smoothly. As they waited for the bus, Lila leaned her head against her mother's arm. "Mama," she murmured sleepily, "I left something nice for Mr. Boss." Maria turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" "I wrote him a letter," Lila whispered, eyes half closed. "I told him you're the best mama ever." Maria froze for a second, unsure if she heard correctly. "You did what?" she asked gently. Lila smiled faintly. "It's okay. I didn't write anything bad. I just wanted him to know you're special." Maria didn't know whether to laugh or panic. She brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face and sighed softly. "Oh, my little one, what am I going to do with you?" When they finally reached home, Maria tucked Lila into bed. She sat there for a long time thinking about the letter. Maybe it would go unnoticed. Maybe he wouldn't even see it, or maybe he would. The thought made her nervous. What if he thought she was being unprofessional? What if he complained to her supervisor? Her mind spun with worry. But as she looked at her sleeping daughter, peaceful and innocent, she decided not to let fear steal her rest. "Whatever happens," she whispered to herself, "it was written with love." Outside, the rain had stopped, and a few stars peeked through the clouds. Maria watched them for a while before going to bed. Meanwhile, far above the city, in that same tall building, the lights in the CEO's office remained off. The letter, now slightly curled under the glass paperweight, waited quietly on the desk, unseen but ready to be found. It was such a small thing, a piece of paper written by a child's hand. Yet, that single note would soon stir something inside a man who had long forgotten what warmth felt like. Maria had no idea that the world she and her daughter lived in was about to change forever. The next morning, the city woke slowly. Rain had left the streets glistening, and early commuters hurried along the sidewalks, their umbrellas bobbing like small, dark flowers in the misty light. Inside the tall office building, most people were still arriving, checking emails and filling their coffee cups. In the heart of the building, Alexander Reed, the CEO, arrived earlier than usual. He preferred the quiet mornings before his meetings began, when the office seemed almost empty and he could think without interruptions. His tailored suit was crisp. His polished shoes clicked softly on the marble floor as he walked toward his office. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, pausing briefly to take a deep breath. The room smelled faintly of coffee, and he noticed immediately that everything looked clean and orderly. Not a single paper was out of place. He frowned slightly, wondering who had been in. He rarely noticed these things, but today, something felt different. As he approached his desk, his eyes caught a small piece of paper tucked under the glass paperweight. At first he frowned. He didn't like anyone touching his desk. He was particular about his workspace, precise about every detail. But curiosity got the better of him, and he picked up the note. The handwriting was uneven, childish, and the words were simple. Yet as he read, something inside him shifted. "Dear Mr. Boss, my name is Lila. My mom cleans your office at night. She is very nice and works very hard. Sometimes she gets tired but still smiles. Please be kind to her. She's my hero." Alexander stared at the words for a long moment. He hadn't expected this. A note like this, written by a child he had never met, was unlike anything he had received in years. Most messages on his desk were business reports, meeting reminders, or urgent requests. Nothing soft, nothing honest, nothing that spoke straight to the heart. He sat down in his chair, the note trembling slightly in his hands. He could feel his chest tightening, a strange warmth spreading through him. Memories came uninvited, memories of his own son, of the laughter that had once filled a home long gone. His wife's smile flashed in his mind, soft and gentle, before the accident that had changed everything. For years he had buried those memories beneath contracts, profits, and meetings. He had convinced himself that work could replace the emptiness. But today, in front of this small piece of paper, the walls he had built around his heart felt shaky. Alexander's eyes drifted toward the photo of the little boy on his desk. He had almost forgotten that picture existed, tucked away among papers and office clutter. His son had been so full of life, so trusting, so alive. The pain of losing him had never fully faded, but he had learned to live with it. Now, reading this note, he realized how heavy his heart had been without him. He picked up the phone and called his secretary. "Bring me the night cleaning schedule." I need to know who's been in my office after hours, he said, his voice calm but carrying a hint of curiosity. Minutes later, the schedule arrived. He scanned it quickly, searching for a name that had never meant much to him before. Maria. The name repeated over several nights. She was the woman who cleaned his office while the world slept, unseen and unnoticed. Alexander leaned back in his chair, thinking. He had never considered the lives of the people who kept his building running. He had assumed they were all quiet, unremarkable, invisible. But suddenly he realized they were real, with struggles, hopes, and dreams just like everyone else. The thought of a small child watching her mother work so hard, yet still seeing her as a hero, made his chest ache. He could feel a lump forming in his throat. How many times had he ignored such small acts of love in his own life? How many moments had passed unnoticed, moments that mattered more than any deal or contract? He set the note down carefully, almost afraid to touch it too roughly. For a long time he just sat there staring at the desk, thinking about the woman who had done this and the child who had written it. There was something pure in the message, something honest and unselfish. It wasn't a request for a raise or a complaint or a demand. It was gratitude. It was love. Alexander realized he wanted to know more. Not in a corporate sense, not as a boss checking on an employee, but as a human being, wanting to understand the life behind the words. He wanted to know who this little girl was, who had written something that touched him more than any success ever could. He asked his assistant to find Maria and bring her to his office. When she arrived, he noticed the tiredness in her eyes, the way her hands still smelled faintly of cleaning products, the gentle, careful way she stood as if not wanting to take up too much space. She looked ordinary to anyone else, but to him she suddenly felt extraordinary. "Maria," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I found this." He held up the note, her eyes widened and her face flushed. "Oh, that's from Lila," she said quietly. "I didn't mean for you to see it. She just wanted you to know." Her voice trailed off, embarrassed. Alexander nodded. "I understand. I've read it. And I want to thank both of you. You didn't have to say anything. I can see that you work very hard, and I want to know more about you, Maria, about Lila, about your life." Maria's heart pounded. She had expected scolding, maybe a complaint, not this gentle curiosity. I don't know what to say," she murmured. "You don't have to say anything," Alexander replied. "Just tell me what's important to you. Tell me what you need. I want to understand." For the first time, Maria felt seen, not as an employee, not as someone invisible, but as a human being. She told him about her struggles, about raising Lila alone, about how she worked nights so her daughter could have a better life. She told him about small victories like Lila's first school recital, and small defeats like bills that never seemed to end. She told him about her hopes and even about her fears. Alexander listened quietly, occasionally nodding, never interrupting. His usual stern demeanor was gone, replaced by something gentler, something almost fatherly. He asked questions sometimes, not in a bossy way, but with genuine interest. When Maria finished speaking, she looked down at her hands, unsure of what he might think. But instead of judgment, he smiled, a small, almost shy smile that didn't belong to the CEO everyone feared, but to a man who had been touched by something pure and unexpected. "You know," he said, "it's strange how a small thing, like a note from a child, can change everything. I haven't felt this moved in years. It's a good reminder of what really matters." Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. I'm glad you understand," she whispered. Alexander stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "I have spent so many years focusing on work, success, and numbers. I forgot about the simple things, the small acts of kindness, the courage it takes to keep going when life is hard. This note, it reminds me of that." He turned back to her. "Maria, I want to make a proposal. Not as your boss, but as someone who wants to help. I want to offer you a proper position in my office, full-time with benefits, so that you don't have to struggle so much. And I want to make sure Lila has what she needs too." Maria blinked, shocked. She had never imagined such an offer. I don't know what to say," she murmured, voice trembling. "You don't have to say anything yet," Alexander said gently. "Take your time. I just want you to know that someone sees you, that someone cares, that someone recognizes all the hard work you do, both at home and here." Maria felt her heart swell. She thought of Lila and how proud she would be. She thought of the nights spent cleaning, the aching muscles, the long hours, And for the first time she realized that maybe, just maybe, all of it had been worth it. Alexander handed the note back to her carefully. "Keep this. It's a reminder to both of us. Sometimes the smallest gestures carry the most meaning." Maria nodded, clutching it to her chest. She felt a warmth spread through her tired body, a quiet hope that she hadn't felt in years. When she left the office that evening, she didn't just leave with a cleaning job completed. She left with the knowledge that someone important in the world had seen her, that her daughter's words had touched a heart long hardened, and that maybe life was ready to open a new chapter for both of them. Outside, the street sparkled from the rain. Lila's small hand held hers tightly as they walked home. Maria smiled down at her, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like the future might be brighter than the past. The city lights reflected in their eyes, and as they walked quietly through the night, Maria realized that sometimes the smallest acts of love, like a child's note, could change lives in ways no one could predict. The letter had done its work. A child's honesty, a mother's hard work, and a simple act of kindness had opened a door that had long been closed. And for the first time, Maria, Lila, and even Alexander felt that change was not only possible, it was beginning. The following days felt different for Maria. She walked to work with a lightness she hadn't felt in years, even though the mornings were just as hectic. Lila was still excited about the night she had spent in the office, and she talked about it constantly. She would whisper to her mother things like, "Mama, do you think Mr. Boss liked my letter?" Or, "Mama, can we leave another note next time?" Maria always smiled, unsure how to answer without encouraging too much curiosity. She wanted to protect Lila's innocence, but also recognize the impact her small act had already made. The world could be kind, she realized, if only people noticed the quiet acts of love that went unseen every day. That evening, Maria arrived at the building a little earlier than usual. She was not sure why she felt so nervous. It wasn't her nature. Perhaps it was because she knew Alexander had read the letter, and something inside her wondered what he was thinking.
Was he annoyed, indifferent, or touched?
She pushed the cart down the hallway, Lila trailing behind her, clutching her small backpack. The little girl's curiosity was endless. She asked questions about everything: the bright lights, the polished floors, even the security cameras mounted high on the walls. Maria answered as best as she could, keeping explanations simple. When they reached the top floor, Alexander was already there. He looked different from how Maria imagined a CEO would look when waiting. He wasn't stern or intimidating. He wasn't pacing or checking his phone. He was leaning lightly against the edge of his desk, his expression calm but alert, almost like he was waiting for something important. "Good evening, Maria," he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth Maria had never heard before. "And hello, little one." Lila's eyes widened and she waved shyly. "Hello, Mr. Boss," she whispered. Alexander smiled. "Do you mind if I call you Lila?" Lila shook her head. "No, you can." Maria felt her cheeks heat slightly. She wasn't sure how she felt about him speaking to her daughter directly, but she trusted his gentle tone. "I wanted to thank both of you properly," Alexander continued. "Not with words, but with something real. I know how hard Maria works."
"I know how much effort she puts into everything, not just at work but at home, for Lila. I don't want her to struggle anymore." Maria's throat tightened.
She had worked so many long nights, survived exhaustion after exhaustion, and had never expected recognition from someone like him. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her emotions steady. "I've arranged a proper position for Maria," Alexander said. "It's full-time with benefits, and it comes with a schedule that won't interfere with Lila's school. I hope this will help both of you." Maria blinked rapidly. I don't know what to say," she whispered. I've never been offered something like this before. Thank you. Thank you so much." "You don't have to thank me yet," Alexander said, smiling softly. "I just want to see her thrive. You deserve a chance to breathe a little, to enjoy life more, and Lila, she deserves a childhood without constant worry." Lila's small voice piped up. "Mama, does this mean we don't have to move money around for everything? Does this mean we can have nice things?" Maria laughed quietly, shaking her head. "It means we'll have less worry, sweetheart. That's what matters most." Alexander looked at Lila. "You did this, you know," he said gently. "Your letter reminded me of something I had forgotten. Small acts matter. They show love in ways that even money and power cannot. You helped your mother, but you also helped me. Lila's eyes grew wide. I helped you? She asked. Yes, Alexander replied. You reminded me to care about people, about what's important. You reminded me that the world isn't just numbers and work. It's about kindness and courage. Maria's heart swelled with pride. Her little daughter, with her innocent words, had managed to reach a part of Alexander that had been frozen for years. She had reminded a man who had everything on the outside what it felt like to truly care. Alexander gestured toward the office as if inviting them to stay. Tonight I want you both to feel comfortable. No work stress, no expectations. Just talk. I'd like to hear about your lives, about your hopes, about the little things that make your days meaningful. Maria was hesitant at first, unsure if it was appropriate. But the sincerity in his eyes told her it was safe. She nodded, and they all sat in the quiet office, the hum of the city below fading into background calm. Lila began to talk first, shyly at first, then more freely, as Alexander listened with genuine attention. She spoke about school, her friends, the stories she loved, and the dreams she had for the future. She talked about flowers she wanted to grow, about helping stray animals, and about reading books her mother read to her at night. Alexander asked gentle questions, not like an adult interrogating a child, but like someone truly curious. Lila's confidence grew as she realized he was genuinely listening. She laughed at small stories, and he laughed with her, a soft sound that made Maria's chest ache with relief. Then it was Maria's turn. She spoke about her work, her struggles, the long nights, the bills, and the constant effort to keep life moving forward. She spoke honestly, without shame, about her fears and her failures, and about the quiet victories that no one else noticed. Alexander listened without judgment. He asked thoughtful questions, sometimes pausing to reflect. He didn't offer solutions immediately or give advice without asking first. He simply listened. For Maria, who had spent years working and caring without acknowledgement, this was a rare and comforting experience. Hours passed. Outside, the city lights twinkled and blurred as rain began to fall softly again. Alexander finally stood. I want to do more than offer a position, he said. I want to support both of you in ways that matter. Lila deserves good schooling, a safe environment, opportunities to explore her talents, and you, Maria, deserve peace and stability. I want to help provide that. Maria's eyes filled with tears. She had never imagined that a simple act of work and care could lead to this. She struggled to find words, but all she could do was smile and nod. Alexander continued, This is not charity. This is recognition. This is about fairness and gratitude. You have given so much, often unnoticed, and it's time that someone notices. I hope this can be a start of something better for all of us. The next few weeks brought changes. Maria transitioned into her new role, adjusting to the regular hours and the security of benefits. The office felt less like a place of exhaustion and more like a space where she could feel respected and valued. Lila's eyes sparkled with every small change. The quiet pride of seeing her mother treated with dignity, the comfort of knowing her school fees were covered, the joy of having someone in Alexander who cared about their little family. Alexander, too, changed. He began noticing the small details of life he had long ignored. A child's laugh in the office, the dedication of staff who often went unseen, the simple acts of kindness that made the world better. He started to open his heart in ways he hadn't imagined possible. One evening, as Maria and Lila were leaving, Alexander called them back. He handed Lila a small gift, a notebook and a set of colored pencils. For your stories, he said with a smile. Keep writing, keep dreaming, and keep reminding the world how small acts can make a difference. Lila's face lit up. Thank you, Mr. Boss, she exclaimed. Maria smiled, tears threatening to fall. She had never imagined this. Her daughter, her life, and even the lonely CEO who had once seemed unreachable, were all slowly coming together in a way that felt gentle, human, and real. That night, as they walked home under the soft drizzle, Maria realized that life could be beautiful in unexpected ways. It wasn't about wealth or power, but about kindness, recognition, and the courage to show care. And in that moment, with her daughter's small hand in hers, Maria felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. Weeks turned into months, and life slowly began to feel different for Maria and her daughter. The small apartment that once felt cold and cramped now seemed brighter. There were fresh flowers on the table, Lila's drawings taped to the walls, and a sense of calm that had been missing for years. Maria had never imagined stability could feel this peaceful. She could now wake up without the heavy weight of worry pressing on her chest. Her mornings were filled with laughter and soft conversations with Lila over breakfast instead of rushed silence. She could pack lunches, walk her daughter to school, and still make it to the office with time to spare. Alexander had kept his word. The new job suited Maria perfectly. Her responsibilities were clear, her pay was fair, and the atmosphere around her began to change too. People noticed how she treated others with patience, humility, and quiet strength. Slowly, she became a part of the office community, rather than just the person who cleaned up after everyone. But what surprised her most was how Alexander himself had changed. The man who once avoided smiles and spoke only in short, direct sentences now carried a calm warmth in his eyes. He greeted staff members by name, occasionally shared light jokes, and often stayed behind to ask Maria about her day. It was subtle, but everyone could see it. The CEO who once seemed untouchable had found something human again. One late afternoon, the office was almost empty. The sky outside glowed gold and pink, and Maria stood by the window, looking out at the fading light. Alexander stepped into the room quietly, holding a folder but not seeming in any hurry to discuss business. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" he said. Maria nodded. "It is. It reminds me of peace. The kind of peace I used to dream about." He smiled gently. "I know what you mean. For a long time I couldn't feel that either." She looked at him, curious. "You? But you have everything anyone could want." Alexander shook his head slowly. "I had success, yes. But not peace. Not happiness. Those are different things." Maria didn't press further, but she understood more than he said. She had learned that even the richest hearts could be lonely if they forgot how to connect with others. There was a short silence before Alexander spoke again. "Do you remember the letter your daughter wrote?" Maria smiled softly. "How could I forget? It changed everything," he nodded. "It did. I've kept it. Sometimes I read it when the days feel heavy. It reminds me of kindness, of honesty, of what really matters." Maria's eyes softened. She just wanted to make someone smile. "And she did," he said. "More than she knows." The two stood there for a while, looking out at the city lights that began to twinkle as night approached. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was peaceful, like two souls resting after a long journey. Later that week, Alexander called Maria into his office again. But this time it wasn't for work. On his desk sat a small box tied with a ribbon and a letter with her name written neatly on top. "I wanted to give you something," he said quietly. "You've given this company more than effort. You've brought life into it. You've reminded me that humanity still exists in the middle of all this pressure." Maria hesitated. "You've already done so much for me and my daughter. I can't accept anything else, please," he said, his voice soft but firm. "It's not just a gift. It's appreciation." She opened the box slowly. Inside was a small silver locket with two tiny photos. One of Lila, which he must have asked permission to use, and one of a sunrise over the city. "I thought it might remind you," he said, "that every day brings a new start." Maria couldn't hold back her tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "This means more than words." Alexander smiled faintly. "And there's one more thing." He handed her the letter. Inside it was an invitation to a school ceremony honoring children who had shown kindness in their communities. At the bottom of the page, Lila's name was listed among the honorees. Maria gasped, covering her mouth. How did this happen?" Alexander smiled wider now. "It seems your daughter's teacher nominated her after she told the story about the letter she wrote. The organizers reached out to me for verification, and I thought it was time you both got the recognition you deserve." Tears rolled down Maria's cheeks. "She'll be so happy. She doesn't even know how much that moment changed our lives." Alexander looked down briefly, his voice growing quiet. "It changed mine too. I used to think success meant control, perfection, and results. But your daughter's words, simple, honest, made me realize that compassion is what truly leads us forward." Maria smiled through her tears. "Maybe kindness is contagious," she said softly. He nodded. "Maybe it is." When the ceremony day arrived, the hall was filled with proud parents and teachers. Children held small certificates, smiling for photos. Lila wore a light blue dress, her hair tied neatly with a ribbon. She looked radiant and confident, yet her eyes still searched the crowd for her mother. Maria stood near the front, her hands clasped tightly, her heart overflowing with pride. Alexander stood a few rows behind her, not as a boss or benefactor, but as a quiet supporter. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted to witness the joy his kindness had helped create. When Lila's name was called, she walked up to the stage shyly. The host read a short summary of her act of kindness, how her letter had inspired someone in power to see life differently. The audience clapped warmly, but the moment that melted every heart came when Lila was asked to say a few words. She held the microphone tightly and said, "I just wanted my mom to smile more. She works so hard. I didn't know the letter would do so much. I just wanted her to be seen." The hall fell silent, moved by the pure honesty in her voice. Maria wiped her tears as Lila continued. "And I want to thank the man who found my letter. He made my mama happy again." Alexander blinked hard, feeling a lump rise in his throat. For someone who had lost so much in his own life, this small family had given him something priceless, a sense of belonging and hope. After the ceremony, outside under the golden light of evening, Lila ran to Alexander and hugged him without hesitation. "Thank you, Mr. Boss," she said with her bright smile, "for helping my mama and me." He knelt down, smiling warmly. "Thank you, Lila, for reminding me how powerful a small letter can be." Maria stood nearby, watching the two of them, her eyes filled with gratitude. In that moment, she realized how far they had all come, from loneliness and hardship to connection and compassion. In the weeks that followed, Alexander continued to help others quietly. He started a small foundation within the company to support single parents, offering training, flexible work, and scholarships for their children. He named it the Little Letter Project. When Maria read the name for the first time, her eyes filled again. It wasn't just a charity. It was a legacy of kindness, born from her daughter's innocent heart. Life didn't become perfect overnight, but it became meaningful. Maria worked hard, Lila thrived in school, and Alexander found peace he had never known before. Their lives intertwined not through grand gestures but through shared humanity. One evening, Maria walked out of the building after another fulfilling day. The city lights shimmered softly and the cool breeze brushed against her face. Lila ran ahead laughing, waving the same small notebook Alexander had once gifted her. As Maria looked up at the sky, she whispered a quiet prayer, not for wealth or comfort, but for gratitude. Gratitude for second chances, for unexpected kindness, and for the people who remind the world that hope can bloom anywhere, even in the darkest corners and somewhere. In an office high above the city, Alexander sat at his desk. He looked at the framed letter still resting beneath the glass, its childlike handwriting slightly faded but forever clear. "Dear Mr. Boss, my mom works very hard. Please be kind to her. She's my hero." He smiled softly, touched the glass with his fingertips, and whispered, "Thank you, little one. You changed everything." The city outside glowed like a heartbeat, alive with quiet stories of love and courage, and in that moment everything felt right.